snow below Yukino hadn't actually met Xiao Ran for the first time that day. She'd seen him from afar before, she just hadn't spoken to him. Even from a distance, he was the most handsome boy she'd ever seen. He wasn't the effeminate pretty boy type. He had a distinctly masculine kind of handsomeness. It wasn't only his looks. There was an aura about him that made her unable to look away. When Yukino climbed up to the rooftop and found Xiao Ran there, she was nervous. It took a lot of courage for her to finally invite him to share her lunch. Fortunately, he agreed. If he'd refused, she thought she might have died of embarrassment. Xiao Ran hadn't expected her to be so bold. He didn't really care all that much about being handsome. He didn't need his face to get by. A man should be judged by his strength. Especially in this Zongman world where power ratings matter, looking good without strength was almost useless. At best, you'd end up as someone's kept boyfriend, or, if luck ran out, paired with a not-so-ideal partner. And in the worst case, if you attracted the wrong kind of monster, ghouls, for example, it could end with you being eaten piece by piece. That would be tragic. I think Xiao Ran-jun is the most handsome, Yukino said so softly that if Xiao Ran's hearing hadn't been sharp, he might not have heard her at all. Thank you. You're very beautiful, too, Xiao Ran replied with a smile. The compliment made Yukino's ears turn bright red. Heat crept up over her face. Thankfully, she didn't faint. The bento her family had prepared was extravagant. The problem was there was simply too much of it for her. She ate less than a quarter and had to stop. Xiao Ran watched, amused, as she pushed her chopsticks aside. Fortunately for Yukino, he happened to be there. The remaining 3/4 of the food vanished into his stomach. Thanks for the meal. Xiao Ran set down his chopsticks. Are you full, Xiao Ran-jun? Yukino asked, blinking. Yes, I'm full, he said, though the concept of being full was foreign to him. He could eat endlessly. Everything he swallowed was broken down and digested almost instantly, mere seconds, and he never felt satisfied the way others did. Let me do that, he said when Yukino began clearing the empty bento boxes. He helped gather the leftovers and packed them back into the outer box, snapped the lid shut, and handed it to her. Thank you. Yukino took the box and set it on the ground beside her. Xiao Ran hesitated, then asked, Snow below, Yukino. Why did you transfer to Teitan High? He'd asked Miko earlier. Miko had told him she moved to Tokyo to get away from the spirits that used to bother her. He wondered what Yukino's reason was. My old school had a natural gas pipeline leak and an explosion. It's still closed, so my family arranged for me to transfer here, Yukino explained. A natural gas leak and an explosion. The explanation sounded oddly familiar to Xiao Ran. He checked his phone. This morning's news had reported a natural gas pipeline leak and a violent explosion on a street last night. Supernatural incidents often got the same dry official explanation. Were the supernaturalist circles always this perfunctory? He suspected Yukino's old school had experienced a supernatural incident, perhaps a fight between supernaturalists or a big disturbance. In a place like this world, schools getting blown up for strange reasons wasn't unheard of. After a few more sentences, the bell for the first afternoon class rang. They left the rooftop with their things. Xiao Ran-jun, goodbye! Yukino waved. Yes, goodbye! He waved back and walked into classroom B. As soon as he took his seat, Sonoko leaned over from behind him. Was that Snow Below Yukino from Class A? She asked, curious. Since when have you two been so close? She was up on the rooftop eating lunch. She had too much bento and asked me to help, Xiao Ran explained. Really? That convenient? Sonoko sounded suspicious. She'd brought a bento before. Claiming to have too much to finish seemed hard to believe. You all said you wanted to meet her. Why haven't you done anything yet? We couldn't find her earlier, Xiao Ran replied. Sonoko pouted. The four of them had planned to use lunchtime to get to know the new classmate, but they'd looked in Class A and the cafeteria with no luck. Who would have guessed she was up on the rooftop with Xiao Ran? Sonoko couldn't help feeling a little jealous. She tried to be detached about other girls around Xiao Ran, but seeing him with someone else still pinched at her. All right, don't sulk. After school, I'll take you to meet her, Xiao Ran said. He reached out, pinched Sonoko's cheek, and kissed her on the face. Her face flushed. She hurried back to her seat. The 3 afternoon classes ended. Xiao Ran grabbed his bag, called Sonoko and ran. and the three of them met Miko and Xiao Hua, who were already waiting at the entrance. The five of them set off toward Class A's door. At that moment, Yukino had just finished packing and was about to leave. They intercepted her in the hallway. Xiao Ran? Yukino looked at the four girls beside him with mild curiosity. They all wanted to meet the new classmate. Hello, I'm Suzuki Sonoko from Class B next door. Sonoko stepped forward and introduced herself with a bright smile. Sonoko smiled and held out her hand. Hello, I'm Snow Below Sonoko. Snow Below, Yukino took her hand with a faint smile. They had met before at banquets and social functions. After all, the Snow Below group wasn't as vast as the Suzukis, but it was still one of Neon's established houses, so there was a passing familiarity. They'd never been close, though. Yukino was reserved by nature, polite but cool. After Ran and Miko introduced themselves as well, the conversation petered out into a slightly awkward silence. Xiao Ran was about to say something to loosen the mood when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Give me a moment, I'll take this, he said, stepping aside. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Xiao Ran answered. Hello? Is this Xiao Ran? A familiar voice came through. Satoru Gojo. Gojo, it's you. I thought it was a spam call. Xiao Ran glanced back at the group and then moved farther away to talk. Didn't you leave your number last time? That's not important. Gojo's tone was casual. You asked about the Kryptonians before, right? I found someone who knows a lot about them. He dug up some things for me. That's great. Tell me. Xiao Ran suspected the call would be about those Kryptonians, or else Gojo would be in trouble. The way he sounded made the former far more likely. As he listened, his mind wandered briefly to Ryomen Sukuna and Itadori Yuji. Sukuna was better off staying sealed inside Yuji. If he ever broke free, it wouldn't necessarily help him. This world was full of beings stronger than the King of Curses. The pink-haired kid from the academy next door could probably crush him without breaking a sweat. Better to stay sealed and alive than erupt and get killed. Fake Lucifer from the night before was a grim example of that. On the other end of the line, Gojo continued. About those Kryptonians, they've been visiting Earth repeatedly, and the visits have become more frequent in recent years. It looks like they're using Earth as a testing ground. Testing ground? Xiao Ran repeated, interest piqued. Yeah, lately there have been inexplicable groups of Kryptonians showing up and causing trouble. Neon's been hit a lot. Last month, a faction called the Onistar people caused quite a stir here. They didn't make it to Tokyo, so I don't know all the details, Gojo added. But I've heard there's a human organization dealing with them, backed by some Kryptonian civilization. The whole thing's complicated. There was also an incident in Tokyo last night, Gojo said. Kryptonians came, but they weren't the same ones we've seen before. They left almost immediately and didn't cause any damage. Weird. Hearing that a human group, supported by an alien civilization, was fighting these invaders confirmed a hunch Xiao Ran had. This all sounded disturbingly like Gantz. He hadn't read much of the manga, only seen the movie years ago, but he remembered the basics. A black sphere of technology, humans recruited to fight alien invaders, and aliens classified by bizarre names, Onion Star, Dwarf Star, Dinosaur Star, and so on. In the manga, a Kryptonian civilization had been invaded and developed a kind of black tech, Gantz, to fight back. That tech ended up on Earth in the hope that humans could be enlisted to save that civilization. If something similar was happening here, the scale of the problem was worrying. So these Kryptonians come here repeatedly, Xiao Ran said softly. If they're sending just cannon fodder, that's bad enough. But if the civilizations themselves are coming, then they're either suicidal or incredibly arrogant, Gojo finished for him over the line. Anyway, I'll get more. By the way, you want to grab a meal sometime? You said you owed me one. Sure, thanks for this, Gojo. I'll treat you next time I'm free. When? I'm free tomorrow. Sorry, I've got plans this weekend. How about next Monday? Works for me. They set the appointment and hung up. Xiao Ran pocketed his phone and returned to the group. What were you all talking about? You look like you're having fun. They were, in fact, in full conversation, no awkward silence at all. Sonoko grinned. Xiao Ran, you done with your call? We were talking about skiing this weekend. Yukino said she's free, so she's coming with us. Xiao Ran looked at Yukino. Xiao Ranjin, are you welcome? She asked, smiling. Of course, welcome, he said. Can you ski? Sonoko asked Yukino. Yes, Yukino replied. I started at 12. I won second place in a middle school skiing competition. Wow, Yukino, that's impressive, Sonoko gushed, then pouted. I'm basically useless at tricks. I started skiing in elementary school, but I can only do the basics. That's fine, Yukino said calmly. I've just practiced longer because I like it. Ran and Miko exchanged glances. Neither of them had much experience on skis, and Miko shot Xiao Ran a hopeful look. Could he teach her? I can ski a little. Just the basics, Xiao Ran said modestly. With his quick mind, there wasn't much he couldn't pick up if he wanted to. We'll split up then, Yukino suggested. There are 6 of us, 3 instructors and 3 learners. Miko's eyes lit up at the prospect. That evening, they went out to eat. Last time Sonoko had treated, tonight Yukino insisted on paying. Xiao Ran protested, but Yukino was firm. He could pay next time. Money wasn't an issue for any of them. Sonoko's family, Suzuki Financial, was one of Neon's top 5 financial groups, and Yukino's Snow Below family owned a comparably wealthy conglomerate. They argued good-naturedly about who would pick up the tab, and in the end, the meal was lively and pleasant, the earlier awkwardness long forgotten. Chapter 135, Snow Below Yukino Attacked. As for Xiao Ran, although he only owned a fledgling entertainment company, the last time he returned from the Batman vs. Superman world, he hadn't brought back much in the way of odd trinkets. What he had done, however, was dig up several gold deposits and, using his heat vision, refine the metal into a single hoard, 500 tons of pure gold. It was real, 99.99% pure, 4 nines. At current prices, that pile was worth an eye-watering 2.25 trillion yen. By comparison, Sonoko's family fortune only ran to the hundreds of billions, and Snow Below Yukino's family was worth mere tens of billions. In absolute terms, the man who looked the least wealthy, Xiao Ran, was now the richest of the group. He wasn't in any hurry to convert all that gold into cash. Gold was hard currency. Its price was more likely to rise than fall. After the dinner party broke up, everyone went home. Sonoko had her butler drive Ran first. Snow Below Yukino gave Miko and Xiao Hua a ride since it was on her way. Xiao Ran, meanwhile, left with Mitsuri in a company sedan. To his surprise, the driver was Ikazawa Yuko. "Boss, surprised to see me?" Yuko asked. She wore a bright red suit with a tight pencil skirt and neat makeup. When Xiao Ran climbed into the passenger seat, she winked at him. "Didn't Yoko arrange this shift?" "She did. I was just finishing something," Xiao Ran replied. "I heard you needed a ride home, so I thought I'd come butter you up," she said with a grin. "Bold of you," he smiled. Mitsuri, sitting in the back, watched the exchange and rolled her eyes. "Drive," Xiao Ran told Yuko, buckling his seatbelt. "Right away, boss," Yuko said, and the car pulled away toward Xiao Ran's villa. Half an hour later, they parked. Yuko linked her arm through Xiao Ran's and chattered as she toured the house. It wasn't a mansion, just a modest city villa, but she admired it as if it were a dream home. "Work hard," Xiao Ran told her. "If you put in the effort, you could buy one yourself in a couple of years." With the company's resources behind her, and with Xiao Ran planning to inject more capital later, the opportunities for artists like Yuko would only improve. She stood on tiptoe, kissed his cheek, then skittered to the other side of the car when she saw Mitsuri hadn't noticed. A short distance away, Snow Below Yukino rode home in a Rolls-Royce. She sat in the back, cradling a group photo from the dinner. Her eyes kept returning to Xiao Ran's face. A warm, unfamiliar happiness bloomed inside her. Is this what love feels like? She wondered. A sudden, deafening bang interrupted the thought. The Rolls-Royce slammed its brakes and nearly threw Yukino forward. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Second miss. A utility pole just fell across the road," the driver reported. Before she could process that, a second sharper crash echoed as something huge struck the car's roof. A grotesque claw smashed through the steel. "Ah!" Yukino screamed as metal tore and the roof peeled back. Half of it flew loose and slammed into a nearby wall. She saw the thing that had done it, an enormous insect-faced monster, over 3 meters tall, with horrible compound eyes and a pair of terrible claws. Its whole form was wrong, faceted eyes, chitinous limbs, and the sight of it made Yukino's voice catch in her throat. "Second miss!" someone shouted. The driver, the family bodyguard, pulled a pistol and took aim. In Neon, gun control was strict, but wealthy households' bodyguards could obtain permits. He fired several rounds at the creature, fingers trembling. The bullets passed clean through the monster as if it weren't really there, intangible, unreal. The driver's face went white. The gunshots, however, had drawn the creature's attention. Its faceted eyes snapped toward him, and a cold paralysis slid into the man's mind. His muscles locked, thought evaporated, and fear poured into him so wholly that he lost the ability to act. In an instant, the monster's claw fell. It smashed the windshield and crushed the entire driver's seat, tearing the man's upper body from his torso. He was gone. No. Yukino's scream shattered the air. She fumbled with the door, scrambled out, and ran, crying for help. The insect thing flipped the wrecked Rolls-Royce aside and gave chase on its four-jointed legs. How could an ordinary girl hope to outrun that? Yukino hadn't gone far before it was upon her. A claw latched into a nearby wall and smashed it in a single blow. She stumbled and fell to the ground, tears spilling down her face. "Who will save me?" she wailed, watching the monster close in, imagining herself torn apart like the driver. On the second-floor balcony of his villa, Xiao Ran had been pouring a glass of wine. He had set the glass on the table and was about to sit when something reached him. An instinct, and then the sound. His superhearing snapped to attention, a desperate cry for help. "Snow Below Yukino is in trouble?" he murmured, frowning. In the next heartbeat, he was gone from the balcony. The air split with a sonic boom that sent neighbors poking their heads out of windows and doors, craning to see what had happened. On the road where Snow Below Yukino was being attacked, chaos swirled, and time seemed to slow as the scene tightened toward a single point. Yukinoshita sat on the pavement, crying, looking like a rain-soaked blossom as the monster closed in step by step. "Don't come any closer! Don't come any closer!" she cried. She scooped up a jagged piece of stone and hurled it at the thing. The rock passed right through its body as if it were mist. Gah! The creature answered with a shrill, inhuman shriek. Then a massive claw rose and swung down toward her. "No!" Yukinoshita squeezed her eyes shut and pressed her hands to her face, bracing for the blow. When nothing came, she timidly lowered her hands and opened her eyes. A tall figure stood between her and the monster, blocking the claw with a single hand. "Xiao Ran?" she breathed. Xiao Ran glanced back at her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. She'd fallen but wasn't injured. "Good." He turned to the cursed spirit. This was a grade 1 cursed spirit, plain and simple. How it had attacked her was another matter. He pulled out his phone, snapped a photo of the creature, and sent it to Satoru Gojo. If anyone knew curses, it was Gojo. Before Gojo could reply, the spirit tried to back away. "Trying to run?" Xiao Ran snorted. With a flick of his fingertip, a crack of magical lightning shot out, spearing through the spirit. A grade 1 cursed spirit took the bolt and shattered into a spray of dark dust, gone in an instant. Xiao Ran wasn't surprised. He always considered such things child's play. Even the thought of Ryomen Sukuna was only an exercise of imagination compared to this. He turned, reached for Yukinoshita, and helped her to her feet. "You're safe now. Why would a cursed spirit attack you?" Yukinoshita's face was still wet. When he asked, she only shook her head. "I don't know. I was on my way home and it just appeared." Her expression changed as she remembered the fallen driver. Her eyes filled again. "If you hadn't come, I would have been killed." She flung herself into his arms and buried her face in his chest, weeping. Xiao Ran held her and patted her back until her sobs slowed. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen said Gojo. He answered. Gojo's voice was urgent even through the line. "Xiao Ran, did you encounter a cursed spirit? How many? Where are you?" "It's handled," Xiao Ran said. "Only one. From its energy signature, it was just a grade 1. Relief softened Gojo's tone. "Only one? Good. I saw your photo," he began. Xiao Ran explained briefly what had happened and that he'd sent the photo. Gojo's voice went low when he finished. "If it was like that, it was almost certainly manipulated. There's likely a cursed user behind it." "A cursed user would send a cursed spirit out to attack an ordinary person?" Xiao Ran asked. "Yes," Gojo said. "Cursed users these days live by taking mutinous, dirty jobs, people paying them to do harm. I've seen cases like this before. Your friend's situation sounds the same." "I see, so they're basically assassins." "Exactly." "All right, I'll search the area and see if I can find them," Xiao Ran said. They hung up. While he was on the call, Yukino Shida had stopped crying and was watching him with wide, curious eyes. Xiao Ran smiled. No more crying? Her cheeks flushed at how exposed she'd been, clinging to him just moments ago. He changed the subject smoothly. That spirit was probably sent by someone who hired a cursed user. Has your family offended anyone recently? Yukino Shida shook her head. She didn't really know the ins and outs of the family business. Her older sister, Yukino Shida Haruno, had already begun taking a role in it. Haruno would likely inherit the Yukino Shida group. Yukino Shida herself had little interest and no knowledge to speak of. No, she said. I don't think so. Okay, once I find the cursed user, we'll find out who hired him, Xiao Ran said. He had his ways to make people talk. The problem was finding the user. He closed his eyes and unleashed his super hearing. Sound flooded into him. City noise, conversations, traffic, and his super brain sorted it all in an instant. Over the din, a man's angry voice rose up clearly. Damn it, it failed. How did a supernaturalist show up? Xiao Ran's eyes snapped open. Found the target. Let's go. Yukino Shida stared at him. Eh? She hadn't seen him do anything. He simply announced he had located someone. It felt like another one of his uncanny abilities. Curiosity burned in her, but there were more urgent matters, and she saved her questions for later. On the rooftop of a building, a figure in a black robe cursed under his breath and turned to leave. A portal crackled open behind him with a shimmer of red like Mars. Xiao Ran stepped through, Yukino Shida at his side. Who? The cloaked man spun around, alarmed. He froze when he saw them for a moment, then bolted. No hesitation, no second thought. You trying to run? Xiao Ran asked, amused. He lifted a hand, and with a quiet motion, the man who'd sprinted away was lifted off his feet and spun into the air, hovering to face Xiao Ran. Yukino Shida looked at the suspended man. Do you know him? Xiao Ran turned to Yukino beside him and asked, but she just shook her head to show she didn't recognize the man. Sir, I was wrong, the cursed master wailed, panic breaking through his composure. Realizing he had messed with the wrong person, he began to beg, voice frantic. Sir, I'll surrender. I'll give you all my savings. I have many cursed spirits, several grade 1s. I'll hand them over to you. No need. I don't want those, Xiao Ran said. He extended a finger and touched the cursed master's forehead. Half a fingertip sank into skin, and a wave of mental power poured into the man's mind. In his previous life, Xiao Ran had used Doomsday's infinite evolution trait to evolve 3 times. Those evolutions had increased not only his physical strength, but his mental capacity as well. His psychic reserves, already vast, had grown to an astonishing scale. If his telepathy were as direct as Professor X's, he could have read anyone's memories at a distance. But even without that, the combination of his massive mental power and Cassandra's atom-level matter manipulation made him terrifyingly dangerous. He could, with a thought, tear a planet apart. As Xiao Ran's consciousness flooded the intruder's mind, memories poured in like a tidal current. He sifted through them until he found what he needed. Then, with a casual motion, he waved his hand. The cursed master in front of him atomized, dissolving into nothing. Xiao Ran turned back to Yukino. Do you know someone named Yamano Koichi? Yukino thought for a moment and recalled. Yes, he's a business associate of my father's. In the memories, I saw it was Yamano Koichi who hired this cursed master, Xiao Ran said. And you weren't the only target. He wanted your entire family. Yukino's face went pale. My sister? What about them? Don't worry, Xiao Ran said. You were his first intended target. He hasn't touched your sister or the others. Relief washed over Yukino. She realized how close she'd come. If she hadn't struck up a conversation with Xiao Ran earlier, he might not have noticed her cry for help, and tonight could have been her last. For the cursed master, the timing had been his undoing. He had taken the assignment yesterday but delayed acting until tonight because Tokyo was too crowded and he feared discovery. That delay cost him everything. Go home and tell your parents, Xiao Ran told her. You don't need to worry about this anymore. Yukino nodded. Then Xiao Ran opened a teleportation gate and sent her to the Yukino Shida estate. I'm leaving. See you tomorrow, he called. Wait, Yukino blurted. Xiao Ran paused. Yukino rushed up, stood on tiptoe, hugged him, and kissed him on the cheek. Then she ran off, cheeks flaming. Xiao Ran reached up, touched the spot where she'd kissed him, smiled faintly, and stepped through the teleportation gate. The gate closed behind him, and he vanished from the Yukinoshita grounds. Late that night, after everything had quieted, Xiao Ran glanced at Ikazawa Yuko sleeping beside him, her face flushed and peaceful. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he was somewhere else. 6 a.m. In the Spider-Man universe, Gwen nestled closer in his arms, adjusting until she was comfortable. She opened her eyes and smiled at him. "You're awake. Do you want to sleep a little longer?" Xiao Ran asked. Gwen shook her head, a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. She burrowed playfully under the covers. Xiao Ran laughed inwardly. All right, so this was how she was going to be. 2 hours later, it was 8 a.m. They were out of bed and getting ready. Gwen grabbed her coat and keys, kissed him on the cheek, and said, "I have an internship at Oscorp today, so I can't have lunch with you. You'll have to get your own." "Got it," Xiao Ran murmured. Gwen opened the door, waved, and left. It was Saturday. Just like in the other world, the timing matched. Xiao Ran didn't have classes, so he decided to spend his time traveling the world and experiencing the customs and traditions of different countries. He had traveled before, but back then traveling mostly meant lounging on some anonymous beach and soaking up the sun. He rarely went anywhere else. By now, he'd grown bored of the meager benefits of daily sunbathing. There was no need to plan a trip just to lie on a beach. These days, he moved fast. 2 or 3 different countries in a day, 8 meals just for the fun of it. When it was evening in New York, he was in New York, riding his motorcycle to pick up Gwen after work and taking her to a top-rated restaurant. During dinner, a breaking news segment suddenly flashed on the TV. Both Xiao Ran and Gwen glanced over. On screen, a figure in a black Spider-Man suit was weaving through the NYPD. "Is that Spider-Man?" Gwen asked, surprised. "No, that's Peter." Xiao Ran recognized the movement at once and shook his head. "Peter?" Gwen's shock deepened. "When did he get out of the hospital?" "Yesterday, I think. Harry's out too. Look." Xiao Ran pointed to another figure on the screen, a Spider-Man in the classic red and blue suit. "Is that Harry?" Gwen watched the 2 Spider-Men brawling across the city with incredulous eyes. The one in the black suit was Peter. The red and blue Spider-Man was Harry. The NYPD were mostly bystanders. The real focus was on those 2. "Weren't they fine last time? Why are they fighting again?" "It's the Venom suit," Xiao Ran said. "Venom amplifies whatever's already in you. This isn't a new Venom. This one's the old type, like the Maguire movies. Even a good person can get twisted by that suit. Peter in this world was never exactly a saint. He even did some horrific things. Once Venom gets into someone like that, whatever evil's in their heart gets magnified fast. That's why they're back at each other so quickly, despite making peace before." On the screen, the fight ran from the city streets to a bridge and onto a plaza. In the end, Peter, wearing the Venom suit, gained the upper hand. The suit had already possessed a Spider-Man from another universe at some point, and the boost it gave Peter was enormous. He easily overpowered Harry, who'd only recently gained his powers. After winning, Peter simply left, disappearing before Harry, slightly injured, could do anything but shout after him. "It's a real love-hate thing," Xiao Ran mused, finding the spectacle oddly entertaining. Later that night, he fell asleep beside Gwen, holding her in his arms. He closed his eyes and was out within seconds. When he woke up again, he was already back home in the Zongmen world. It was exactly 6 in the morning. Without waking Ikazawa Yuko, Xiao Ran slipped out of bed, washed up, changed into casual clothes, and headed downstairs. In the courtyard on the first floor, Mitsuri was already up, practicing her breathing technique. Xiao Ran stood and watched for a moment. When she finished, he called to her, and they went out together to the nearby snack street for breakfast. By 8 o'clock, Yuko had to leave. She drove off to work and couldn't stay. Xiao Ran and Mitsuri were leaving soon as well. At 9, they met at Haneda Airport and boarded Suzuki Shiro's private plane bound for Hokkaido. On the flight, Xiao Ran took the chance to ask Yuko about what had happened the previous night. "My dad said he'd take care of it, so don't worry," Yuko replied. "By the way, Xiao Ran," she added with an expectant look, "Dad knows you saved me. When you're free next week, he wants to invite you over as a guest. Will you come?" "Next week?" Xiao Ran considered for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, tell your parents to pick a time." Okay," Yuko beamed at his answer. Sonoko soon arrived, smiling, and sat down nearby. "What are you two talking about?" she asked. Xiao Ran summarized the events of the previous night. Everyone present already knew most of his little secrets. There was no point hiding anything from the group. When they heard Yuko had been attacked, they all expressed concern. "I'm fine, thanks to Xiao Ran Jun," Yuko said, shaking her head and looking at him with admiration. She had a good impression of Xiao Ran, and the way he'd come through for her had only strengthened her feelings. She knew he and Sonoko were together, and she'd noticed Sonoko didn't seem bothered by Xiao Ran's closeness with other girls. Mitsuri lived with him, Ran and Miko sometimes had intimate moments with him too, and Sonoko didn't complain. Yuko wasn't sure how that worked, but she figured she might still have a chance. At 10:40, the private plane touched down in Hokkaido. A car from the Suzuki family met them and drove them to a Suzuki villa near the ski resort. The girls chatted and laughed along the way. Xiao Ran mostly scrolled through posts on the Supernatural forum on his phone. People in the Zongman world loved to share everything about their lives, and the forum filled with thousands of new posts daily. He checked it regularly for anything interesting. They arrived at the villa before noon. "Let's assign rooms first, then go to the hot spring hotel next door for lunch," Sonoko announced, already directing the day's plan. Everyone else was happy to leave the details to her. Xiao Ran in particular liked not having to plan. He preferred to go wherever the mood took him rather than follow a strict hour-by-hour itinerary. The villa was large, and each of the 7 of them had a private room. In total, there were 12 empty rooms in the house, plenty of space. After they dropped off their bags, they walked the few minutes across the snow to the hot spring hotel next door to eat and enjoy the scenery along the way. Outside the snow-covered forest, Sonoko and the other girls posed and chattered while Xiao Ran held the camera and took several photos of them. "Let me see." Sonoko hurried over, plucked the camera from Ran's hands, and scrolled through the photos on the display. "Oh, Ran, you take such good pictures. Did you study photography?" Ran shrugged modestly. "I just know a little. If she wanted, she could probably learn fast enough to look like a professional. After all, anyone with a bit of practice could take a decent picture." A blue car rolled slowly toward them, and Ran tugged Sonoko to the side to avoid snow spray. Suddenly, a ridiculous noise came from the car's back seat. "Burry, burry, burry!" They both turned. In the back sat a little boy with a round potato-shaped head, wiggling his bottom. Before either of them could react, a fist came down on his forehead. An instant red bump swelled up. Ran blinked. This world had a weird way of borrowing characters. As soon as she saw that notorious butt wiggle, she knew who this family was. The face in the front passenger seat confirmed it. Nohara Misai. Of course, the Nohara family. No wonder the timeline here was chaotic. It wasn't just Conan showing up. "Oh, Ran, look!" Sonoko had already spotted the boy. She covered her mouth, laughing as she tugged Ran's sleeve. "That kid is so funny. His head's like a potato." Ran smiled faintly. "Yeah, he's pretty entertaining." "That's Nohara Shinosuke," Sonoko said, grinning. "He's the 5-year-old from the Kasakabe Defense Force. Famous everywhere." They watched as the car turned the corner and pulled up to the small inn ahead, the Onsen Grand Inn. From the road, the place looked far older and far less grand than the name implied. Across the driveway, the Nohara family climbed out. Hiroshi, who had been driving, shut off the engine and stretched like a man who'd been cramped behind the wheel for hours. "We're here," he muttered. "Finally." "Ugh, my back," he complained, rolling his shoulders. Long drives left him stiff all over. If he didn't loosen up, skiing would be impossible. Misai hopped down, clutching a promotional poster. She squinted at the picture, then at the building. "This isn't the same place at all," she said. Hiroshi reached and flipped the poster. Now the photo and the inn matched, pretty much, so he brightened. "See? It's the same." Shinosuke had already tumbled out of the car and was gawking at the entrance. He assumed it was a haunted house-themed hotel. "A haunted house," he declared, eyes shining. Misai laughed and straightened him. "It's an inn, not a haunted house. We're staying here for 2 days." Shinosuke looked skeptical. "But it looks scary." "It looks retro, that's all," Misai sighed. "With your dad's salary, we can't afford a fancy place. You've got to learn to put up with it." "Looks like Dad's fault, huh?" Shinosuke pointed accusingly at Hiroshi. What kind of face is that? Hiroshi snapped, clearly offended. I'm sorry, my salary isn't enough for a big hotel. I used my bonus to pay for this, Hiroshi added, trying to save face. Misai's eyebrows shot up. You did? You actually paid? She grinned happily, flipping a flirtatious look at him. We don't have to worry about money then. Come on, Shinosuke. This place is kinda nice. It's retro style, you know? You know? Shinosuke puffed up and nodded like a miniature grown-up. Yeah, very retro. Hiroshi stared at them in mock resignation. I give up. As he glanced toward the entrance again, he hollered, Hey, who's carrying the luggage? Misai turned back, batting her eyelashes. Honey, please, she cooed. Hiroshi shuddered theatrically. What's with that face? It's disgusting. Shinosuke, standing at the inn's doorway as his parents bickered, spread his tiny hands and turned to the proprietress who had appeared without anyone noticing. Sorry about my parents. They always argue. The proprietress just stared. What a strange family. By then, Ran and the rest of the group had already checked into the hotel's 11th floor restaurant. Because the hotel was built into the mountainside, the view from their table was breathtaking. A wide sweep of snowy peaks and white slopes stretching into the distance. They'd taken a big table right by the window so they could enjoy it. This view is amazing, Sonoko sighed, lifting her camera. I have to take a picture. She snapped a few shots of the distant mountains. Soon the dishes arrived. Since they planned to ski in the afternoon, no one drank alcohol. Glasses of juice and water clinked instead. Cheers, everyone. Sonoko raised her glass with a bright grin. Conversation and laughter filled the table. The food here tasted even better than usual, maybe because it was a holiday, maybe because mountain hotels had a way of making simple things taste special. Plate after plate was passed around until the table looked like a small battlefield of empty dishes. How is it? Are you all about done? Ran asked, patting her stomach. She sounded a little guilty. She'd eaten more than she'd meant to. I'm full, Ran admitted, rubbing her belly with an affectionate little pat. Mitsuri, sitting to Ran's left, diligently kept busy finishing what was left on the plates, the others eagerly helping her. A moment later, a small voice called out, Ran! They all turned. Conan came sprinting over in his tiny blue suit, his short legs pumping as he ran. He had a bright, surprised grin. Ran, what a coincidence! Ran met his cheerful face and looked back at Dr. Agasa, who followed a step behind him. Coincidence? Maybe you, jealous as ever, were following us, weren't you? Others might not know what Conan was thinking, but how could Ran not? She was clearly on guard where Ran was concerned. Seriously, there was no trust at all. Conan, I didn't expect to run into you all here by chance, Ran said. Xiao Ran chuckled and rubbed Conan's little head. Conan tried to dodge with a look of disdain, but failed, immediately looking sulky. It only made him cuter. Xiao Ran smiled and greeted Dr. Agasa again. Ran, I didn't expect you guys to be here too. Dr. Agasa was clearly bad at lying. He couldn't even meet Ran's eyes. I brought Conan along for something, but he insisted on skiing, and I've got something I can't put off. Perfect. Ran, why don't you take Conan skiing this afternoon? I've got to run, Sonoko said, eager to hand him off. Ran, being kind-hearted, didn't suspect Dr. Agasa was fibbing. She agreed without hesitation. Conan had become, in a way, part of the family, Dr. Agasa's disciple and a friend, so Ran had no problem looking after him. Seeing his plan worked, Dr. Agasa immediately found an excuse and slipped away. Left behind, Conan dragged up a chair and sat down beside Ran. Sister Ran, when are we going skiing? He asked, putting on an innocent face. After all, his reason for staying had been to ski. He couldn't suddenly back out just because Ran was here. As a detective, well, as a fictional detective, he couldn't make such an obvious mistake. Still, Conan glanced at the table full of girls, then at Xiao Ran, who was chatting and laughing with Sonoko and Yukino, and wondered if he was worrying for nothing. But his thoughts tumbled anyway. Xiao Ran was a playboy, a total scumbag. Even with lots of women around him, he'd go looking for more. Ran was too kind. What if she got tricked by someone like that? I have to watch over Ran and make sure she doesn't get fooled. At that moment, Conan felt a mission settle on his shoulders. Of course, he hadn't asked Dr. Agasa to bring him here because he was jealous. He was here to protect Ran from someone like Xiao Ran. He successfully convinced himself. Outside the hot spring hotel, the group piled into the car Sonoko had arranged and headed for the ski resort. In the car, Xiao Ran kept staring at Conan, and Conan's skin crawled. Brother Xiao Ran, why are you staring at me? Conan asked, trying to sound innocent. He couldn't exactly call him by name loudly in front of everyone. That'd be rude. And Ran's fists were nothing to scoff at. Conan didn't want to get punched. Nothing. I heard you've solved quite a few cases with Kogoro Mori recently, Xiao Ran said with a smile. He was trying to see if anything about Conan stood out. Someone who seemed to attract murders wherever he went didn't look like a coincidence. But try as he might, Xiao Ran saw nothing unusual about Conan, an ordinary elementary school boy, maybe with a little more muscle and bone density than average. No supernatural telltale signs, just a kid. Yes, Dad's been doing great lately, Conan said, inwardly rolling his eyes. Incredible, my foot. Kogoro was taking all the credit. Conan had done all the real work, while Kogoro basked in the glory and earned the nickname Sleeping Kogoro. Public perception had shifted, though, and Ran looked impressed. She's surprised, too, Ran murmured. She hadn't expected her father to improve so much as a detective. He'd gone from a third-rate, unknown investigator to someone with a bit of nationwide recognition. Life was unpredictable. Maybe, Ran thought, if her father kept changing for the better, he'd been useless and lecherous before. Maybe someday her parents could reconcile. His improved career gave her hope. She figured she might even be able to change her mother's mind if she worked at it. That's great. Finally, Kogoro Mori's talents are getting some use, Xiao Ran said with a warm smile. Conan gritted his teeth at the praise. What talent, he thought. Conan kept the expression of agreement on his face, praising Kogoro as well, though it made him feel slightly sick. The car soon arrived at the ski resort. Everyone grabbed skis and gear and took the cable car up the snowy slope. When they reached the top, they disembarked and started fastening their skis. According to the plan, each of us will teach one person, Sonoko announced, then looked at Conan holding a tiny pair of skis. Kid, can you ski? Don't underestimate me. Of course I can, Conan sniffed. Then go play by yourself, Sonoko said, relieved to be done with him, and pulled Ran off to teach her. Mitsuri, have you ever skied? Yukino asked. I haven't tried it, but it looks pretty simple, Mitsuri answered. She'd never skied before, but watching others, the motions seemed straightforward. After all, as a member of the Demon Slayer Corps, she'd trained her breathing and body control since childhood. Her coordination was well above average. Skiing won't be a problem for Mitsuri. Yukino, do you want to teach Miko or Xiaohua? Xiao Ran asked. I'll take Xiaohua, Yukino said. Miko said she's got some basic knowledge, so she should be easier to teach. I'll leave her to you. All right, Mitsuri and Miko, come with me, Xiao Ran called, and led the two away to teach them. Conan scowled inwardly. If only he'd said he couldn't ski, then he could have learned with Ran, he thought, frustrated. It's really simple. Watch my movements and copy me, Xiao Ran said as he snapped on his skis and took up his poles. He demonstrated a few basic stances and turns for Mitsuri and Miko. Okay, got it? He asked. Mitsuri nodded and strapped into her skis, imitating Xiao Ran's posture. She started off a bit wobbly, but soon found her balance and looked like she was skiing quite well. Looks like Mitsuri's ready to graduate, Xiao Ran said with a smile. It's all thanks to Sir Xiao Ran's excellent teaching. Mitsuri called back, grinning. With a whoosh, she slid past and off down the slope. She'd never skied before and decided there was no need to keep practicing with a teacher. She wanted to enjoy it. It looked like fun. After Mitsuri left, only Xiao Ran and Miko remained. Xiao Ran, is it like this? Miko didn't dare slide out boldly like Mitsuri. She stood in place and mimicked Xiao Ran's earlier motions, trying to get them right. No, your hands should be like this, and your knees slightly bent. Xiao Ran stepped in and took Miko's hands, guiding her into the correct posture. Some contact was unavoidable when teaching someone hand in hand, and Miko's face flushed bright red, probably the down jacket warming her up, Xiao Ran told himself with a faint smile. Okay, I'll watch from the side. Give it a try. Xiao Ran encouraged her to start slowly in a small area and to widen the range once she felt stable. There was nobody else nearby, so there was no danger of colliding with anyone. All right, Miko said, nodded, mustering courage, and began to slide forward in tiny, tentative steps. After 2 or 3 meters, she lost her balance and toppled backward. Ah, she cried, and her face drained of color until a pair of steady arms caught her. You all right? Xiao Ran asked. I'm right here. I won't let you fall. Leaning against him, Miko nodded, cheeks still warm. She straightened and kept practicing. After a half hour of careful effort, she finally felt she'd got the hang of it. I think I've learned it, she said, smiling. You're doing well, Xiao Ran said. He pointed to a gentle stretch about 200 meters ahead. Want to try sliding over to that platform? Miko glanced and judged the distance reasonable. I can do it, she said, unexpectedly confident. Good, try it then. I'll watch from the side. Just go boldly. Xiao Ran watched her trustingly. Okay. Miko trusted him completely and readied herself. Meanwhile, under Yukino's guidance, Xiaohua was still struggling with the basics, mainly balance. After another awkward fall, she sat in the snow and muttered, irritated. Darn it, it's all their fault. Yukino stared in silence. It was Xiaohua who kept falling, and yet Yukino inexplicably felt like the one who had failed. Watching others pick things up so effortlessly was almost painful. Some things, she thought, you simply didn't have, no matter how smart you were. Xiaohua, haven't you tried this before? She asked gently. Just then, Sonoko and Ran glided over. Ran, who had started learning under Sonoko, was already getting the hang of it. Seeing Xiaohua sitting in the snow with an angry expression, the two skiers came to see what had happened. My body won't balance, Xiaohua grumbled. She'd looked forward to skiing and even done homework beforehand, but when it came to the real thing, she couldn't seem to get it right. It's their fault. Sonoko and Ran followed the direction of Xiaohua's glare, exchanged a quick look, then glanced at each other and at Yukino, and both breathed a small, relieved sigh. Yukino raised an eyebrow at their behavior. On a nearby small slope, Edogawa Konan had just set off when a potato-shaped kid in front of him stuck out his bottom and made a face. Konan rolled his eyes. Kids, he thought, these days. As he turned away, he didn't notice another sudden rear right in his path and ended up collapsing into the snow. What the? Konan spat, scowling at the little boy. Hey, you stinky brat, what are you doing? My name isn't Hey, the boy shot back, pulling up his pants. My name is Nohara Xiaoxin, and I'm 5 years old. And who are you? Xiaoxin demanded, pointing at Konan's glasses. Why are you wearing that? These are called glasses, Konan said, adjusting them. I'm Edogawa Konan. I'm 8 years old, 3 years older than you, so call me Big Brother. Shh, what's so great about that? Xiaoxin turned away with a huff. Konan didn't know why, but the brat's expression made him itch to hit back. Then he heard the kid muttering under his breath. Weird kid, weird name, weird face, and those glasses are weird too. Konan felt a sudden surge of irritation. Reflect? No, he wasn't the one who needed reflecting on. You can't say that even with your back to me, he snapped. Xiaoxin gave a small, put-upon look. Everything's not allowed. Why are you so troublesome? Konan fell silent, suddenly feeling childish, arguing with a 5-year-old, but he couldn't muster a better retort. Elsewhere, a brown-haired young man flashed what he clearly thought was a dazzling smile at Mitsuri. Hello, miss. You ski so well. My name is... Mitsuri simply circled around him and whooshed away without so much as a backward glance. The young man was left blinking. Mitsuri didn't notice. She'd discovered that skiing was exhilarating and a little addictive. Her movements felt natural, and to her eyes the others around didn't match her pace. She launched off a high slope, twisted 1.5 turns in the air, and landed cleanly. People nearby gasped and pointed. Oh my God, that girl skis so well. Is she a professional? So amazing. She's beautiful. I want to meet her. I saw some guy try to hit on her, and she just skied right past him. Embarrassing. Mitsuri, completely absorbed in the thrill of the run, didn't hear the chatter. From where she was, Miko had finally managed to glide up to the small platform 200 meters away and stopped to watch. Mitsuri's daring tricks and graceful landings sent a flush of envy across Miko's face. You're jealous? She murmured to herself, smiling ruefully as she watched her friend fly. Xiao Ran skied up and stopped beside Miko, smiling when he met her eyes. Do you think I can be as good as Sister Mitsuri? Miko asked, unable to hide her excitement. Of course, but you'll have to practice a lot, Xiao Ran replied. Mitsuri is so good because she practiced kendo for years. It gives her control over every muscle in her body that most people don't have. Basically, Work hard, he added with a grin. He didn't mention talent. That might have dampened Miko's enthusiasm. All right, I'll work hard. Inspired by Mitsuri, Miko pushed herself harder. Xiao Ran stayed at her side, smiling and ready to help in case she fell. The resort had safety measures, but nothing was foolproof. After an hour of practice, Miko was improving so much she didn't need Xiao Ran watching every move. At that point, Sonoko and the others tugged at Xiao Ran. Go teach Xiaohua, they urged. Sure enough, Xiaohua was still standing in place. She hadn't skied a meter. Xiao Ran slid over. What's wrong? Did something happen? Yukino stood nearby, looking withdrawn. Xiaohua, a little aggrieved, said, I can't control my balance. Do you have any tips? Balance? Xiao Ran asked, and had Xiaohua show him what she'd been trying. She took a skiing stance and immediately lurched forward. Xiao Ran caught her before she could faceplant. I think I know why, he said after a quick look. The posture she'd been using suited most people, but not her. That's why she kept pitching forward. He adjusted her stance to one better suited to her body type. When she tried again, she didn't fall. I can control my balance, Xiaohua cried, delighted. She pushed off gingerly and slid a few meters without wobbling. Overjoyed, she ran back and hugged Xiao Ran, planting a kiss on his cheek. Thank you, Xiao Ran. Yukino watched with a mock resentful expression while Xiao Ran chuckled, about to reply, when a scream cut through the air. Get out of the way! Everyone, get out of the way! I can't control it! They turned to see Miko had somehow gotten to the top of a very steep slope and was sliding down fast. Her poles had flown who knows where. Sonoko and the others went pale. At that speed, a fall from that height could be a bad sprain, or worse. Before anyone could do more than gasp, Xiao Ran shot off. He carved across from the side and skied against the flow, and somehow his speed matched and passed Miko's. Just as Miko began to lose balance and tip toward a face-first fall, he caught her and, with a quick maneuver, brought them to a steady stop. It's all right. You're safe now, Xiao Ran said, patting her gently, as Miko clung to him with her eyes squeezed shut. When she opened them and realized she'd been rescued, she burst into tears and hugged him tight, her voice trembling. I thought I was going to die. Are you all right? Are you hurt? Sonoko and the others flocked over. Shinichi had even brought a little boy along, who had been lagging behind until now. I'm fine, really. Thank you, everyone, Miko said, wiping her eyes and looking embarrassed but grateful. At that moment, the little boy bounded forward. Hello, big sisters. My name is Nohara Shinosuke. I'm 5 years old. My favorite snack is teddy bear biscuits, and I like to put green onions in my natto. He peered up at the high school girls. Do you put green onions in your natto? Whose child is this? Ran asked, crouching down to the little boy with a smile. Where are your mom and dad? They got lost, the boy said solemnly. Everyone stared. Then Sonoko snapped her fingers. Wait, you're the potato kid from earlier whose mom. Just then a frantic woman appeared, calling, Shinosuke, why did you run off? Nohara Mise was on edge. Seeing Shinosuke standing there unharmed only made her more furious. Excuse me, did my son bother you? Nohara Hiroshi asked, suddenly trying to look suave in front of all the young girls. Mise materialized behind him and landed a perfect, furious smack. Hiroshi collapsed in a puff of comic smoke, his legs flailing. For a moment, everyone worried he'd been hurt, but he climbed back up, shaking his head. Only a bump on his skull proved he'd been struck. Don't embarrass me, Misai scolded, while Hiroshi cowered and promised never to do it again. Even Shinosuke, chastened, muttered apologies. It's okay, he's so cute. He didn't bother us, Sonoko said, smiling. Xiao Ran crouched and pinched the little boy's chubby cheek, something he'd wanted to do for a long time, but had never had the chance until now. Shinosuke blinked and looked at him with trust. Big brother, the boy asked in an earnest, childish way, are all these big sisters your girlfriends? Xiaoxin beamed at him with pure adoration. Xiao Ran, Nohara Misai patted Xiaoxin's head. Oh, I'm so sorry. He's just a kid. He doesn't mean anything by it. Please don't mind him. She shot a quick, embarrassed look at her son. Really, was that something he could blurt out so casually? She thought, inwardly scolding him. It's fine, she added aloud. Kids say the cutest things. Xiao Ran smiled. After a little more small talk, they learned the family was from Tokyo, Or rather, the Noharas lived in Saitama Prefecture, just inland from Tokyo, only about 30 kilometers from downtown. Pretty close. If I ever have a chance to visit Saitama, Xiao Ran said, I might have to trouble you, Mr. Nohara. You're always welcome. Nohara Hiroshi laughed. He could be a bit of a goof sometimes, but he was a good man at heart. Misai and little Xiaoxin were warm and friendly too. There was nothing sneaky about them. After a pleasant chat, they all said their goodbyes. Bye-bye, big brother. Bye-bye, Conan. Bye-bye, big sisters. Xiaoxin waved energetically as he trailed after his parents to go play. Such an amusing kid, Sonoko said with a smile, then sneaked a glance at Xiao Ran beside her. He's very entertaining. Ran nodded in agreement. She thought Xiaoxin was adorable. Conan, meanwhile, pouted. Where was the charm in that noisy little brat? Conan thought. You haven't had to put up with him all day. He's sharp-tongued. How are your ankles? Can you still slide down? Xiao Ran asked Miko. She tried to stand, but a sharp pain lanced through her right ankle. Tears pricked in her eyes, and she shook her head. No, I think I twisted it. A twist? Xiao Ran crouched and inspected it carefully. The injury looked like a strain of muscle and ligament, thankfully not a fracture. That's good news. I'll take you back to the villa. It's still early. When everyone's done, come find us there, and we can go to dinner together. Everyone agreed and urged Miko to rest and not to move too much. I'll help you, Xiao Ran said, and supported her as they headed for the cable car. The others watched them board, waved as it left, and then turned back. Half an hour later, Xiao Ran had Miko back at the villa and settled on the edge of her bed. Sit here for a bit. I'll get some medicated oil to rub it, he said. Luckily, it's not a bone injury. That would have been a lot more troublesome. Miko nodded obediently and waited. When he returned with a small first aid kit, he took out the oil and some cotton swabs. Take off your shoes and socks. She slipped off her slippers and rolled her socks down, cheeks flushed a little from the embarrassment. Pull your pants up a bit, he suggested. Then he poured a little oil onto a swab and began to rub it gently into her ankle. The ointment didn't sting. It felt cool and soothing instead. Miko watched him with something like relief and something else. If she hadn't twisted her ankle, she thought, she wouldn't have had this chance to be alone with Xiao Ran. Okay, I'll bandage it now, Xiao Ran said, looking up. Miko's face went rosy. Thank you, she stammered. He smiled at her reaction, then wrapped gauze around the ankle, tying it off in a neat bow. There, all done. Miko studied the little bow and couldn't help smiling. It's cute, she murmured. I'll put the kit away. Do you want some water? He asked. Just a little, she replied. He returned with a glass of warm water, which Miko sipped half of before setting it down. You should get some rest, Xiao Ran said. I'll head out now. Wait, Miko grabbed his sleeve before he could reach the door. Yes? He asked, turning back. Could you stay and talk with me for a while? She asked, her cheeks coloring. Being alone with him felt so rare. She wasn't ready for it to end. Would you be bored by yourself? Xiao Ran smiled and sat down beside her. All right, I'll stay. Thank you, Xiao Ran. Miko's small hands twitched uncertainly, not sure where to rest. Don't be nervous, Xiao Ran teased, gently taking one of her hands. At once, Miko froze. You're making me even more nervous, she complained in a tiny voice. He was amused and exasperated at the same time. Just as he was about to let go, Miko threw her arms around him and hugged him tightly. Xiao Ran, I don't dislike you, she blurted, gathering courage. I know you're with Sonoko already, but I can't help liking you. Does that make me a bad girl? Xiao Ran blinked, surprised, then gently disentangled her and looked at her earnestly. Miko, you're not a bad girl. A hopeful look crossed her face. Then, do you like me? He smiled and pinched her nose playfully. You silly. If I didn't like you, would I be so nice to you? You should know that when a man is nice to a woman, he's either after money or something else, Miko said, half challenging. Huh? She waited for his answer. Any man who breathes isn't without a little desire, Xiao Ran replied with mock solemnity. Miko broke into laughter. She liked his frankness, the way he wasn't pretending to be some perfect saint. He was unabashedly blunt, and she liked him for it. She leaned closer, the space between their faces disappearing. Be careful, she whispered. Your foot's still injured. It's fine. It barely hurts now, he said. She paused, then moved in again, closer still. Xiao Ran met her halfway, both of them aware of the fragile moment. What else could he say? He didn't want to be rude. The girl had been so forward that refusing again would look insensitive. With a casual wave, Xiao Ran closed the villa door. The curtains swished shut on their own, and the lights clicked on, bathing the room in warm light that would stay on for nearly 2 hours. Around 4:30 p.m., Sonoko and the others returned from the ski resort. "We're back," Sonoko called as she barged into the villa, then froze when she found the first floor empty. She ran up the stairs and saw Xiao Ran stepping out of Miko's room. "Shh, keep it down. Miko just fell asleep," he hissed. Sonoko nodded and lowered her voice. "How is she? Is her foot okay?" It was only a minor injury, not something that required more than rest. She'd simply been exhausted. Xiao Ran didn't correct her. "She'll be fine after a couple of days' rest," he said. Relieved, Sonoko smiled, stood on tiptoe and planted a quick kiss on his cheek. "No one's here," she giggled. Xiao Ran smiled back, pinning her lightly against the wall. He only let go after a few minutes. Sonoko's face was already flushed as they went downstairs together. Back on the first floor, everyone crowded around to ask about Miko. Xiao Ran repeated the same answer. She'd be fine. The group relaxed. It was bad enough that someone had been hurt during an outing, but at least it hadn't been serious. "I'm going to see Miko," Xiaohua announced and hurried upstairs. "Quiet," Xiao Ran warned. "She just fell asleep." Xiaohua murmured and crept up. "I'm going to make tea. Anyone want some?" Yukino asked. "I'll help," Ran said. "I'll go too," Sonoko added, trailing after them with a smile. Only Mitsuri and Xiao Ran remained downstairs, and Conan had already been dropped off at Dr. Agasa's. He'd used skiing as his excuse for staying, and now that the trip was over, he'd been returned to Agasa-sensei. Mitsuri suddenly started sniffing around Xiao Ran. "What's that?" he asked, amused. "You smell of Miko," she declared, eyes bright, very strongly. Xiao Ran gave a small smile. Mitsuri met his gaze a moment, then looked away. "This is the 5th one, isn't it?" she said in a teasing, resigned voice. "Mitsuri's really worried you'll be too busy in the future." Xiao Ran blinked. Since when had she picked up that tone? He ruffled her hair. "Stop watching those pointless idol dramas when you have nothing better to do," he chided gently. Mitsuri was fond of languishing in front of the TV and binging soap operas, and he suspected she'd learned her sarcasm from them. "But those dramas are so good," she protested indignantly. Xiao Ran stroked his chin. "All right. When we go back to Tokyo, I'll find something for you to do." "Eh?" Mitsuri immediately regretted having been sassy. If she could take it back, she would have. But Xiao Ran was mercilessly calm, utterly unmoved. Because Miko was hurt and asleep, only 6 of them had gone out for dinner. Afterward, they brought back a packed meal for her. As soon as they arrived, Xiaohua took the food and hurried upstairs. She knocked at the door. "Come in," Miko called. The door opened. "Miko, we brought you dinner," Xiaohua said, shaking the bag. "Thanks, everyone," Miko replied. Xiaohua put the food on a small tray and set it on the bed. "Eat up. You'll get better once you have some strength," she said, smiling. Miko had noticed her appetite had been off for the past couple of days. She wasn't sure why, but now she was a little hungry. It was past 6, she'd been skiing that afternoon, and Xiao Ran had made her work through a couple of basic math problems, so her stomach was definitely rumbling. "I'll dig in," she said, picking up her chopsticks and lifting a piece of meat to her mouth. Delicious." "You try it too," Miko said, offering a piece to Xiaohua without thinking. As best friends for over 10 years, she knew what the gesture would do to Xiaohua's face. The younger girl's eyes lit up, and she leaned over, stuffed the meat in with a muffled "ah woo," and sighed blissfully. Really good. Outside, in the courtyard, Xiao Ran was enjoying the snowy evening when his phone rang. He picked up. "Is something wrong calling so late?" he asked. "No, I just finished work," Yoko Okino said on the other end. "I wanted to tell you, the negotiation about Ai Hoshino didn't go through. They're standing firm and insisting we pay the liquidated damages in the contract. They won't release her otherwise." Xiao Ran had handed the task to Yoko after talking with Ai Hoshino. He hadn't expected a peaceful outcome. Ai wasn't someone who could be easily reshuffled out of her agency, and Xiao Ran had wanted the whole of B. Komachi. Of course, the agency would resist. He listened, unsurprised. If this could have been resolved amicably, that would have been a miracle. Chapter 140. Is Shaoxin Conan's nemesis? Hot Spring Hotel murder case. It's fine. Leave the rest to me. Xiao Ran spoke into the phone to Yoko. There's nothing else. I found a few promising newcomers. With a little training, they'll do well. All right, Yoko replied. I'll be back in a couple of days and inject another sum into the company so we can expand. Xiao Ran still had a lot of cash on hand, several billion yen in total. He planned to put half of it into his entertainment company to develop new projects. Yoko was pleased. If the company grew, she'd profit directly. She didn't know exactly how much Xiao Ran intended to put in this time, but she guessed it would be at least a few 100 million yen. After they hung up, Xiao Ran set his phone down and stared at the snowy landscape, thinking about how to handle Ai Hoshino's former employer. Forget the theatrics. This can be handled with mind control. No need to drag it out. It's just wasting time, he decided. He had no intention of launching a full corporate war. Intrigue and backroom maneuvers were a waste of effort when he could simply take control. If he moved quickly, he could also gain control of another large entertainment company. Ai Hoshino's current agency was worth over 10 billion yen. Not bad, another tidy profit. He sat in the yard for a while, then went back inside. Upstairs, Miko and Xiao Hua were chatting and laughing. He joined them briefly before heading out again. After 9 o'clock, everyone was exhausted from a full day of skiing and sightseeing. They washed up and went to bed early. Xiao Ran had just gotten out of the bath and was about to lie down when the door opened and Sonoko slipped in wearing pajamas. "You are?" he asked. She gave him an exasperated look and flopped onto the bed, taking up half of it. "Humph, you're so heartless. If I hadn't come looking for you, you never would have come to me on your own." Xiao Ran smiled and went over to soothe her. Sonoko was easy to placate, a few kind words and she clung to him. Then she suddenly asked, "Xiao Ran, will you ever abandon me?" "What nonsense," he said gently. "How could I abandon you? Don't overthink it." She pouted. "But you have more and more girls around you. Today there's Miko, Yukino likes you, and there's Xiao Hua and Ran." "It's not as dramatic as you make it out," Xiao Ran said, exasperated. "First, how did you manage to include Ran in that list? She's been focused on Shinichi Kudo's disappearance, nothing else. And Xiao Hua's just a kid who likes food, and Yukino." "I'm talking about you," Sonoko snapped, slapping him playfully. "Do you dare say you don't like any of them?" Xiao Ran fell silent. Sonoko snorted triumphantly. "See? I knew it." She looked at him with mock disgust. "You, Casanova? I don't even know what I saw in you." "Are you mad?" he asked, holding her. "No," she said, eyes glistening. "I'm just a little scared." Her voice trembled. "If you ever stop liking me, you have to tell me right away so I can prepare myself, okay?" Xiao Ran hugged her tighter. "Don't worry, that day will never come. Our Sonoko is so beautiful. How could I possibly stop liking you? I'm more afraid you'll stop liking me." "Impossible," she declared. "The person Suzuki Sonoko likes, she loves forever. She never gives up halfway." Yes. Our Sonoko is the most steadfast," he said, smiling, and planted a few kisses on her cheek. She finally smiled back. The next morning, Xiao Ran woke at 6. Sonoko was still asleep. He slipped quietly out of bed, changed, washed, and went out to the garden with a cup of coffee and a book. He liked this life, sitting alone with a cup of coffee, reading, watching the scenery. In a world like this, with an odd, stretched sense of time and his own near immortality, he didn't worry about wasting it. Around 8, the villa came to life as everyone else woke up. Because Miko's foot was still injured, she was ordered to rest in her room and wait for breakfast to be brought. Xiao Ran opened her door with a tray. "How did you sleep?" Okay. I just rolled over once," she admitted, cheeks flushed. Even though their relationship had advanced, Miko still blushed under his gentle attention. "Let me check." Xiao Ran sat on the bedside stool, lifted her small foot, and inspected the ankle. "You're healing well. You should be able to walk tomorrow." Miko nodded, lowering her head and sipping milk to hide her shyness. "Too bad you can't go skiing today," he said. She looked disappointed. She'd been looking forward to it, but he squeezed her cheek. "We'll come again next time." After finishing breakfast, Xiao Ran carried the dishes out and bumped into Xiao Hua, who had come to see Miko. "Miko already finished?" she exclaimed, staring at the empty plate in his hands. "She did. Good appetite," he said with a smile. Hey, I'm going to see her." Xiao Hua sang as she skipped back into the room. Xiao Ran smiled and headed downstairs. After everyone had eaten, they set off for the ski resort. They planned to spend the whole day there, but would return at noon for lunch. You can't play on an empty stomach. Because Miko couldn't go, Xiaohua volunteered to stay with her. Xiao Ran had intended to stay as well, but Miko insisted he go ski with Sonoko and the others. She said she'd be fine with Xiaohua keeping her company. Listening to that, Xiao Ran marveled again at Miko's kindness and patience. All the girls he met seemed so tolerant, so willing to forgive his wandering. He wondered inwardly whether he had some strange quality, a male succubus trait or something, that made women cling to him. He could see the traits of other characters in the Zongmen world, but he still couldn't detect any special trait of his own. Perhaps he was listed as a character from the Zongmen world, or maybe his own entry simply wouldn't show up no matter what Ran tried. It didn't matter. Ran felt too lazy to puzzle over such trivia. If it was a good thing, that was plenty. Besides, dwelling on it felt a bit like pretending not to benefit from it. They'd spent the whole day at the ski resort, only returning to the villa at noon to eat and drop off lunch for Miko and Xiaohua. The rest of the time had been nothing but non-stop play. Midday they ran into Xiaoxin and his family again, though Nohara Hiroshi was nowhere in sight. According to Xiaoxin, his dad had sneaked out last night to visit a hostess bar and somehow strained his back. Of course, that was Xiaoxin's version of events. After Nohara Mise explained later, Ran learned that the truth was far less scandalous. Xiaoxin had woken up in the night to use the bathroom, wandered outside by mistake, and in the process Hiroshi had strained his back trying to look for him. No hostess bar involved. You couldn't always take anything, Xiaoxin said at face value. He loved exaggerating, but the kid was entertaining, especially to Conan. Xiaoxin had taken a particular delight in teasing Conan, who always looked so serious. Maybe Xiaoxin saw a bit of Kazama in him. He pestering Conan mercilessly, and Conan, unable to shake him off, was the perfect foil. From another angle, Xiaoxin was something else. It was the first time Conan had seen someone ski with their butt sticking out like that. The posture was, to put it mildly, unforgettable. That evening, they all went to the Hot Spring Hotel for dinner. With Ran's encouragement, a somewhat recovered Miko joined them. They invited the Nohara family and Dr. Agasa and booked a private room with a large round table. The meal was lively. With a few drinks in them, Dr. Agasa and Hiroshi, who were separated by more than 20 years, swayed and sang with their arms thrown around each other. Ran grabbed Sonoko's camera and snapped a photo to remember the moment. Then something crashed down from above the private room's window, which faced the distant, snow-capped mountains. A heavy thud cut through the laughter. What was that? Yukino's sharp eyes caught the movement, but someone was faster. Conan, who had been the target of Xiaoxin's teasing not long before, bolted for the window. He yanked it open and leaned over, gripping the sill with both hands to see below. Conan! Ran lunged instinctively to pull him back, but Conan was already climbing out. Something happened, he said solemnly. Someone just fell. A person? Wouldn't falling from that height kill them? Everyone in the room froze. Dr. Agasa and Hiroshi, tipsy a moment ago, sobered instantly. Ran, Sonoko, and the others hurried downstairs. Outside, a crowd had already gathered, murmuring and pointing. I can't believe someone died. How unlucky. Maybe a suicide. So young. Why would they do this? I saw him yesterday with a group of young people. They were all laughing. I never would have guessed. Has anyone called the police? They already have. They should be here soon. Pushing through the whispering onlookers, they found the body face down in the snow in front of the hotel. Blood had pooled and darkened the pristine white. Misai immediately covered Xiaoxin's eyes, though she was herself pale with fear. Don't look, Shin. Someone actually died. Hiroshi, stunned and queasy, covered his mouth and staggered away. He made it to a corner and vomited. Several others in the crowd had reacted the same way. Death was still too distant a reality for ordinary people, and the sight triggered an instinctive physical reaction. Are you all right? Misai asked Hiroshi as she guided Xiaoxin toward him. I'm fine. I just drank too much earlier. Hiroshi tried to sound steady, waving a hand. Dad, wipe your mouth. Xiaoxin pressed a handkerchief into his hand. Hiroshi blinked. The handkerchief was a light pink one, clearly for a girl. "Where did you get this?" "I picked it up over there," Xiaoxin said, pointing vaguely into the crowd. Hiroshi and Misai exchanged a puzzled look. "That isn't the victim's, is it?" Misai asked, flustered. "I hope not," Hiroshi muttered, giving Xiaoxin a helpless, exasperated look. Meanwhile, Conan was already studying the scene like a detective in his element. He measured the angle with his eyes, comparing the location of the body to the hotel. He frowned. "Something's off." Rand stood beside him. "What do you mean?" "The distance is wrong," Conan pointed. "We were eating on the 11th floor, and the person fell from a floor above us. If it was a straight jump or fall, the landing spot should be there." He indicated a patch of snow roughly 2 meters from where the body actually lay. "It's possible he jumped forward as he fell," Rand offered. "That's possible," Conan replied, "but his posture doesn't match. If someone jumps intentionally, they're usually conscious and will make a reflexive defensive movement before they hit the ground." Conan pointed to the victim's hands. "This person's hands are relaxed, naturally open, no defensive action. It looks more like he lost consciousness and was thrown out." Rand nodded slowly. "So this is likely not a suicide. It could be homicide." Conan's face was grave. "Someone might have killed him." "Does that mean the killer is still in this hotel?" Rand breathed. Yukino and the others exchanged worried looks. The idea that a murderer might be under the same roof chilled them. By the time they finished speaking, the police had arrived. The area around the body was cordoned off, and hotel guests were temporarily prohibited from leaving until they'd been questioned. Inside the first-floor lobby, uniformed officers began the official work of securing the scene and taking statements. Ran and the others found seats. "Eh? Where'd Conan go?" Ran looked around and realized Conan, who had been right there a moment ago, was nowhere in sight. That little brat. Did he slip off to play detective on his own again? Sonoko, hearing that Conan had disappeared, immediately assumed the kid had gone off to satisfy his love of sleuthing. "No, where's Shinchan gone?" Misai and Hiroshi also noticed Shinosuke was missing and instantly grew worried. "Don't panic, both of you," Ran said, holding them back. "Shinchan probably went upstairs with Conan. That kid loves investigating things. Shinosuke likely followed him because it sounded fun." "What? That's no good." Misai's worry deepened. "If there really is a murderer here, aren't Conan and Shinchan in danger?" "I'll go up and look for him," Hiroshi announced bravely, already running toward the elevators. "Wife?" Misai watched him go, her face full of concern. "You stay here with Ran and the others. Let Hiroshi go." Ran hesitated. She wanted to see how Conan handled the case, so after asking Mitsuri to stay and look after everyone, she headed for the elevator lobby too. The hotel foyer was crowded now. Police were stationed at the entrance, and a senior officer was speaking with some guests, but Ran walked straight to the elevators. On the 21st floor, Conan and Shinchan had already found the room the victim had fallen from. "Shinchan, stand by the door and keep watch. If anyone comes, call me." Conan hadn't wanted the boy tagging along. Shinchan could be aggravating, and Conan had enough trouble with rowdy classmates at school, but Shinchan wouldn't be dislodged. The boy stood to attention and called out with a salute. "Okay, boss." Conan winced. "Don't call me boss. Call me big brother or something. Just not that." Shinchan nodded earnestly. "Okay, boss." Conan gave up correcting him. He had to hurry before the police sealed the room. He tucked his hands into his gloves, no fingerprints, and went straight to the balcony. The glass door was open, and the curtains fluttered in the breeze. The room itself was neat. Nothing suggested a struggle. Conan climbed up onto the railing, then paused, looking down. The body below lay directly opposite the balcony. Snow had fallen lightly during dinner, and a thin dusting lay on the balcony railing. There were Conan's fresh handprints where he just leaned over, and a clean stretch about 2 meters long in the middle of the railing. Everywhere else the snow remained. Conan fetched a chair, stood on it, and examined the clear patch closely. Faint scratch marks marred the paint, barely visible but present. If the victim had been knocked out and thrown over, the body would have scraped along the railing and left those marks. If true, the victim's clothing should bear traces of the railing's paint. This hotel's exterior and railings were painted orange. Conan looked the balcony and room over for anything else that might clinch the hypothesis. On the table, he found a letter, an apparent suicide note. The victim apologized to someone named Kimiko, saying he had hurt her out of greed and now intended to atone with his death. Kimiko, Conan murmured, and took out his phone to photograph the note. There was nothing else obvious. The room was almost too clean. Conan frowned. Something felt off. "Someone's coming," a tiny voice whispered, and someone blew a puff of air against Conan's ear. He jumped and spun around to find Shin-chan grinning behind him. Conan snapped, "I told you to call me if someone came. Don't sneak up and whisper in my ear." Shin-chan pouted. "But you said to call you when someone came." Conan wanted to throttle the kid. He was 5 years old and infuriating. "I told you to call me, not sneak up behind me and blow in my ear." At that moment, several officers entered the room. A female officer, who usually handled speaking to children, looked surprised to see 2 little boys. "Are you 2 staying in this room?" she asked gently. "No, we don't live here," Conan said, putting on his best innocent expression. "The door was open, and we just ran in to play." The officer smiled and asked them to step outside. The police were going to be working the scene. Conan nodded and was about to tell Shin-chan to go, but the boy had vanished. Where did he go? Conan was about to call out when a familiar, impish voice floated from the female officer's back. "Big sister, my name's Nohara Shinosuke. What's your name? Do you have a boyfriend? Do you like putting green onions on your natto?" Conan turned and saw Shin-chan perched on the female officer's back, chattering away, one hand propping his chin as if conversing with an old friend. Conan stared, utterly baffled. How had the kid gotten over there? Did he teleport? Little brother, come down quickly. Big sister still has work to do." The female officer didn't expect the child to suddenly leap onto her back. She scrambled to get Xiaoxin down, but he was as slippery as a gecko, crawling all over her shoulders and impossible to catch. "Idiot! Get down now!" Conan had had enough. He rushed forward, yanked Xiaoxin off the officer, and gave him a sharp tap on the head. "Hiss! That hurts!" Conan rubbed his right hand, his face contorting. Xiaoxin just grinned. My mom hits my head all the time. It's already like copper." "Copper head and iron arms," Conan corrected through gritted teeth. A moment later, the 2 of them were escorted out of the crime scene. "Boss, where are you going? Wait for me." As soon as Xiaoxin saw Conan run off, he chased after him, shouting, Xiaoxin, where are you?" On the 21st floor elevator lobby, Nohara Hiroshi had just stepped out of the elevator and called out anxiously. Ding! Another elevator arrived at the same time, and the doors opened to reveal Ran. "Brother Hiroshi, have you found Xiaoxin?" Ran already suspected the answer. Hiroshi shook his head, worry all over his face. Xiaoxin, where are you? It's me, it's Dad." Then a familiar figure came running down the corridor. It was Conan. "Boss, wait for me." Xiaoxin followed close behind. "Xiaoxin." The moment Hiroshi saw his son, he ran over and scooped him up. Xiaoxin immediately squirmed. "Dad, your beard is so scratchy." No, you naughty child. Do you know how worried your mom and I were when you went missing?" Hiroshi held him tight, voice shaking. Xiaoxin felt something wet on his cheek. He wiped it and tasted salt. "Dad, are you crying?" "No, I just ran too fast and a bug flew in my eye," Hiroshi said stubbornly, wiping his face. Conan pulled Ran toward the window and spoke quietly. "Ran, I need your help. I think this was really a murder, but I don't think that room is the primary crime scene. It looks too clean. I need you to find out which rooms the victim's companions are staying in." "That's all?" Ran asked. "That's enough," Conan said. Ran thought for a moment. They were traveling in a group of 5. They're in rooms 2124, 2126, and 2107. The people in 2107 are a couple. "Thanks," Conan nodded, then bolted back down the hall. "Boss, wait for me." Seeing Conan run off again, Xiaoxin wriggled free from his father's arms. "Dad, let me go. I want to help Boss investigate." "You can't go. It's dangerous. You're only 5. Hiroshi protested, clutching the set of clothes Xiaoxin had left behind when he slipped out like a cicada shedding its shell. "No, I'm going," Xiaoxin yelled, and in a flash he was free, leaving his clothes in Hiroshi's hand. Hiroshi grabbed the discarded clothes and gave chase. Ran, meanwhile, had stopped to snap a picture. In the photo, Xiaoxin's escape left a comical trail. the discarded outfit in Hiroshi's grasp, and a very determined child racing off. As expected of Xiao Xin, Ran muttered, then followed. Conan used the universal lockpick Dr. Agasa had given him to open the door to room 124. The lock clicked, and he slipped inside, closing the door behind him. Xiao Xin, now back in his underwear, dashed ahead after Conan. Hiroshi, holding the clothes, chased him down the hall, shouting, "Xiao Xin, stop!" Officers from room 2122 heard the commotion and came out. They saw a small child in only his underwear running away and an adult chasing with a handful of clothes. Acting on instinct, an officer moved to stop the adult. "Stop! What are you doing?" "No, it's—" Hiroshi began, but the officer wrestled him to the ground, twisting one of his arms behind his back. Hiroshi hit the floor and yelped, "It's a misunderstanding. Really, it's a misunderstanding." Xiao Xin skidded to a halt, then ran up to the female officer from earlier at full speed. "Hi, big sister, we meet again. Want to eat some Koala's March cookies together?" He propped one hand against the wall and struck what he thought was a very cool pose. The female officer blinked. Why was this odd little boy here again? And where were his clothes? Ran arrived then. "Officer, the man you grabbed is that child's father," he explained. The officer's face fell. "Oh." He released Hiroshi at once and bowed a deep, apologetic bow. "I'm sorry, I'm very sorry." Hiroshi forgave him with a tired smile. "It's okay, it was just a misunderstanding." Watching Xiao Xin tantrum, Hiroshi sighed. "Xiao Xin, don't make trouble for the officers. Put your clothes on now." "No, I want to find boss." "Be sensible," Hiroshi pleaded. "I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to." Inside room 2124, Conan adjusted his glasses under the light, which flashed off the lenses. A confident smile crossed his face. He'd already pieced together several points. Now, only the last step remains. He turned and walked out into the hallway. Xiao Xin, having managed to pull on his clothes again, saw Conan emerge and ran over, eyes bright. "Xiao Xin, you came at the right time," Conan said. "I have something very important I need you to do. Come over here and I'll tell you." Conan leaned close and whispered a few words into Xiao Xin's ear. "Do you remember it clearly?" "Yes, I remember," Xiao Xin said, nodding, trying to look serious. "Are you really sure?" Conan asked again, still suspicious. Xiao Xin nodded earnestly. "Yes, I remember half of it." Conan stared at him. That meant he hadn't really remembered. Conan didn't like the idea of entrusting something so important to someone who could forget half of it, but there was no one else. Any older person would have a much harder time pulling this off. He sighed inwardly and decided to trust Xiao Xin this once. "All right, I'll tell you again. This time, you must remember it." Conan repeated the instructions into Xiao Xin's ear. When he finished, he asked, "Did you get it this time?" Xiao Xin nodded solemnly. "I really remembered it this time." "Good." Conan lowered his voice. "This involves the future of Neon and the peace of the world. Xiao Xin, you're part of the Kasakabe Defense Force, aren't you? That means you must do it. Do you understand?" He felt ridiculous saying such coaxing, but in 2 days he'd already learned Xiao Xin's character well enough to know how to keep him focused. If Conan hadn't cajoled him, who knew if a pretty older sister wouldn't distract him the next second? It wasn't a lack of trust. It was experience. Conan's eyes flicked briefly to Nohara Hiroshi, chatting and laughing with a female police officer nearby. The resemblance was uncanny. Case closed. Xiao Xin took after his father. Back in the hotel lobby, when Xiao Ran returned, everyone was still gathered. Misei immediately ran over. "Well, did you find Xiao Xin?" Xiao Ran nodded. "Yes, he's been found. Hiroshi is with him now." Misei breathed a huge sigh of relief. "Oh, thank goodness." Sonoko and the others waved at Xiao Ran. "Did you find the murderer?" Sonoko asked softly. They all knew Xiao Ran had abilities beyond the ordinary. They wanted to know whether she'd identified the killer. "Yes, it's been confirmed," Xiao Ran said, deliberately withholding the name. "You'll see who it is in a bit." "What?" Sonoko protested. "Why are you teasing us? Why won't you just tell us?" "If I tell you now, the show later won't be any fun," Xiao Ran replied with a smile. "A show?" the others asked curiously, glancing at one another. Xiao Ran only smiled mysteriously and said they'd see when they went downstairs. The hint of a spectacle made everyone curious. A little later, Xiao Xin and his father returned, and Xiao Xin got an immediate, affectionate scolding from Misei, 2 well-placed thwacks to the head. Is he really okay after that? Won't you beat him to a pulp? Sonoko whispered to Xiao Ran, alarmed by Misei's heavy-handedness. He's fine, Xiao Ran said, smiling. Xiaoxin's used to it. She also noticed something else. Whether it was Xiaoxin, Nohara Hiroshi, or Misai, the three of them all shared a strange kind of resilience. It didn't look like a supernatural power. On the surface, they seemed ordinary, but their bodies healed unusually fast, like a comic book's near-indestructible characters. Some injuries recovered quickly. Others healed more slowly in a pattern that didn't make sense medically. Hiroshi's persistent back problem, for example, didn't mend as quickly as minor bruises did. This, Xiao Ran thought, was the kind of comedic manga immunity those characters had. They should have been dead 100 times over by the plot's logic, yet they soldiered on, impossibly lively. Inspector Sakamoto was in the lobby interviewing the 5 companions of the deceased. The rest of the hotel's guests had been told to stay in their rooms or in the lounge. They weren't allowed to leave. The Hokkaido police weren't incompetent. At least they could tell whether someone had been murdered or whether they'd committed suicide. The so-called suicide note had been sent for handwriting analysis, and the experts confirmed it wasn't written by the deceased. Someone had forged the note. That meant this was a homicide, premeditated murder. A forged note suggested the killer had planned it. An on-the-spot forgery wouldn't have been convincing enough for anyone but a professional to miss the subtle differences. "Tell me," Inspector Sakamoto said to the 5 people seated before him, "did any of you have a grudge against Fumio Kishida?" The 5 suspects bristled at the accusation. "Officer, you must be mistaken. We were friends with Kishida." "Right. How could we kill him? We grew up together," someone added defensively. "Are you accusing us because you can't find the real killer? I have an uncle who's a great lawyer," another protested. "Then tell me your alibis," Sakamoto said flatly. He wasn't expecting a confession. He wanted to hear where each person was when Kishida died. Anyone without an alibi would draw more suspicion. One by one, they offered explanations. "I was eating in the restaurant. The staff and other customers can back me up. I was talking with Chiyoko in our room. She can vouch for me. We were in our room the whole time. Our room is quite far from Kishida's. I was on the phone in my room. You can check my call records. I was in the restroom, but I heard Koyama on the phone outside arguing a few times. Each claim had to be verified." "I'll have my officers check those alibis," Inspector Sakamoto said. Conan, who had slipped out of the elevator and scanned the room, saw the 5 gathered and the circle of police. He ducked toward a corner behind the sofa where Nohara Hiroshi was sitting. "You're the one," he murmured to himself, then crept closer. "Sorry, Uncle Nohara," Conan whispered and opened his watch. He aimed the tranquilizer launcher at Hiroshi's neck and pressed the trigger. The dart flew almost silently and struck its mark. Hiroshi, sitting upright and talking, swayed. His eyes drooped, and then he slumped into a deep sleep on the sofa. Conan closed the launcher and flipped open his voice-changing bow tie. He adjusted the settings, then, in a clear, confident voice, announced, "Everyone, I know who the murderer is." Heads turned at once. "Husband," Misei exclaimed, staring at Hiroshi's strange slumped posture. Sonoko and the others instinctively glanced at Xiao Ran. "Watch Hiroshi perform," Xiao Ran said with a smile. Conan stayed hidden behind the back of the sofa, watching silently. "Wait a minute," someone blurted. "What did you just say? You know who the killer is?" Inspector Sakamoto stepped forward and addressed Nohara Hiroshi. "You do? You really solved it?" Nohara Hiroshi stood with a calm confidence that made everyone turn to him. "Yes, I've pieced everything together, and I know who killed Fumio Kishida." Murmurs rippled through the room. "But before I name the killer, I need to explain the motive. It ties back to a suicide by jumping 3 years ago." "All right," Sakamoto said, skeptical. Unlike Inspector Magure in Tokyo, Sakamoto disliked amateur detectives and thought their interference undermined the police. He listened anyway. Nohara continued. "The girl who jumped was 19. Her name was Kimiko. Back then, she was said to have been forced into humiliating situations and extorted for money. Unable to bear it, she took her own life. Whoever killed Kishida did it to avenge Kimiko." "So who is the killer?" someone demanded. Nohara looked at Hayato Ito. "Mr. Hayato Ito, do you think Fumio Kishida deserved to die?" All eyes swung to Ito. He bristled. What? Why me? I don't even know any Kimiko. Sure, Kishida was a sleazebag if that's true, but what does that have to do with me? Nohara smiled. It has everything to do with you. You liked Kimiko, but you never told her how you felt. That's a lie, Ito snapped. What proof do you have? Show me. You want proof? Nohara said. Kimiko worked at a convenience store on Perfume Avenue 3 years ago. Your company is nearby, isn't it? You must have stopped there. That's just a guess, Ito said stubbornly. Ask your coworkers, Nohara replied. The store's name is Daily Good Mood. They're distinctive. Don't you remember the handwritten sticky notes they put on the bentos? Wish you a good mood every day. That's it, Chiyoko broke in. About 3 years ago, for almost 6 months, Ito would buy a bento from that store every day for lunch. There was always that little sticky note on it. Ito glared at Chiyoko, but still refused to admit anything. So what? Lots of people bought bentos. It doesn't prove I knew Kimiko. Nohara's expression hardened. Even if you don't admit it, you made a mistake, one big enough to prove you killed Fumio Kishida. I made a mistake? Ito's voice wavered. He tried to shrug it off. Prove it. Fine. Nohara called out, Xiao Shin! I'm here! The child who had been sitting on Misai's lap jumped up. Is this what you mean, Daddy? He pulled a folded scrap of paper from his pocket and handed it to Nohara. Give it to Inspector Sakamoto, Nohara said. Sakamoto unfolded the note. It held a few words in handwriting he immediately recognized. Ito's face drained of color. He remembered the boy from earlier, how Xiao Xin had run up and asked him to teach him a few words, and now the connection clicked. These are Mr. Ito's handwriting? Sakamoto asked Nohara. Yes, Nohara said. Have your handwriting analyst compare it to the forged suicide note. Sakamoto called the analyst. The man took the paper, scrutinized the strokes, and his eyes narrowed. Overall, the scripts aren't identical, but look at these 3 characters. The way those strokes are formed is the same. The hand movements are consistent. Sakamoto handed the papers to Ito and glared. Nohara leaned in. Mr. Ito, will you still deny it? Or are you too ashamed to admit it, just as you were too ashamed to confess your feelings to Kimiko back then? Ito's face crumpled. Something inside him snapped. Shut up, he roared, then his voice broke. You don't know anything. Kimiko, she'd agreed to be my girlfriend. He collapsed into sobs and then, in a torrent of emotion, confessed. That scumbag Kishida, he deserved it. I killed him. People like him don't deserve to live. How could he make a kind girl like Kimiko suffer? He forced her. He drove her to it. I did it for her. For justice. The room fell quiet. A few faces softened with sympathy. Ito's grief seemed genuine. If Kishida had been guilty, people could understand the rage. But Nohara watched him with a different sadness. You really thought you were carrying out justice, Nohara said quietly. What if I told you were wrong? What if Kishida wasn't the monster you believed he was? Ito looked up through tear-streaked eyes. That's impossible. No, he forced her. He blackmailed her. I saw the messages. You don't know Kimiko at all, Nohara said. You only know the story Kimiko told you. In truth, Kishida wasn't the cause of her death. He was Kimiko's boyfriend back in high school. They'd been together for a long time and later broke up, but he actually transferred money to her several times to help her through hard times. Ito clutched his head, unable to take it in. No, he helped her? Yes. Nohara's voice was soft but firm. Kimiko had fallen into online gambling. She racked up massive debts with high-interest loan sharks. Kishida sent her money, 4 transfers totaling 4.86 million yen to help her. Her total debts to friends, family, and loan sharks came to about 13.2 million yen. I understand you lent her 2 million yen as well. Ito went rigid. The world tilted. If this was true, then he had killed the wrong man. No, he screamed, sinking to the floor. This can't be true. It's not true. It is, Nohara said. If you don't believe me, ask the officers who investigated Kimiko's death. The records show Kishida's transfers. He never forced her. He tried to help. The people who cornered her were the loan sharks. They threatened her with everything, and she saw no way out. Ito rocked back and forth, muttering, No. His sobs turned into something like a wail. Inspector Sakamoto produced handcuffs and closed them around Ito's wrists. Hayato Ito, you're under arrest for the murder of Fumio Kishida. Sakamoto looked down at the broken, hysterical young man and sighed. He wasn't a hardened criminal, just a foolish, heartbroken man. In the end, Sakamoto thought with a weight in his chest. Love and misunderstanding had led him to commit a tragedy, and worse, to kill someone who had been trying to help. The case was finally closed. After finishing his work, Conan slipped quietly out from behind the sofa and melted into the crowd, pretending he had been there the whole time. And Nohara Hiroshi? Misai had woken him up, and he had no idea what had happened. Even when Misai praised him enthusiastically for having brilliantly solved the case, Hiroshi only blinked in bewilderment. Me? Solve the case? He wondered if he was still dreaming. But everyone around him was congratulating him, and even Inspector Sakamoto came over to thank him, though his expression wasn't especially warm. Hiroshi went from confusion to suspicion of temporary amnesia, then finally accepted the praise with delight. That's right, Nohara Hiroshi had turned the tide and cracked the case. Maybe Conan's tranquilizer darts also have a mild intelligence-lowering effect? Xiao Ran thought, watching the scene. Otherwise, why hadn't Hiroshi, the one right in the middle of everything, noticed anything amiss? And why would he be so happy to take credit? Great, now he was sleeping Hiroshi. Hiroshi, save me. With the case closed, Xiao Ran and the others said their goodbyes to the Nohara family and left the hotel. Back at the villa, everyone was still talking about the investigation. No one had expected that the dead man, Fumio Kishida, would turn out to be innocent, accidentally killed. If Fumio had really been a villain, Hayato Ito's act would have been, if not legally excusable, at least morally understandable. But as it stood, Hayato had become nothing more than a fool who killed without knowing the truth. He had spent 3 years planning, practicing forging Fumio Kishida's handwriting until his own penmanship had nearly vanished. He'd even subconsciously left traces of Kishida's style in his writing. But the few words on that note weren't conclusive proof of murder. Then again, who told him to confess? He admitted to the crime himself. No other evidence was strictly necessary. Night came. In Miko's room, Xiao Ran watched her sleep in his arms, closed his eyes, and soon drifted off too. Spider-Man's world. Xiao Ran woke at 6 in the morning. Gwen was still asleep. He slipped out of bed, went downstairs, turned on the TV to a news channel, and fixed himself something to eat. The morning bulletin was reporting yesterday's incident in Hell's Kitchen. Peter and Harry at the center of a huge brawl, one venom-possessed spider, one Spider-Man, rampaging through the neighborhood and damaging public buildings. Even Kingpin's men seemed to have gotten involved, acting as Venom's allies. Peter actually got mixed up with Kingpin, Xiao Ran chuckled to himself. If Peter from other universes knew about this, wouldn't he want to personally punish his counterpart? In some versions of the story, Kingpin even killed Aunt May, driving Peter dark and leading him to kill Kingpin in revenge. Normally, Spider-Man doesn't kill. He focuses on stopping villains, and their deaths are usually the villain's own doing. Green Goblin impaled by his glider, Dr. Octopus dying after plunging into the river with an uncontrolled device, and so on. Killing isn't Peter's method, except in those darker versions where personal loss pushes him over the edge. Even so, recent film versions show Peter forgiving villains who wrong him, which, Xiao Ran thought wryly, was pure nonsense. After a while, Gwen woke. They had breakfast at the villa, and Gwen left for her internship at Osborne Industries. Xiao Ran had planned a little trip to other countries for fun, but later returned to New York the same day to pick Gwen up after work. They went out for dinner and a movie before finally coming home. Gwen hadn't been living at home long, and she made no secret of the fact that she never wanted to go back. She'd worked hard in school so she could move out as soon as possible. Now her plan had just been accelerated. She didn't miss her parents at all. If they were gone, she wouldn't care. The next morning, Xiao Ran woke at 6, made coffee, and sat out in the yard to read as light snow fell. The view was pretty enough to stay a while. At 7, everyone else stirred. They had to return to school. It was Monday, after all. By 7:30, they had finished getting ready and carried their luggage into the first-floor living room. "Everything with you?" Xiao Ran asked. The 6 of them shook their heads, nothing left behind. "Then let's go." Xiao Ran opened a 3-meter-wide portal and led the way through. On the other side was his hometown in Mihua Town, Tokyo. They hadn't flown back the night before because they'd already agreed Xiao Ran would send them home through a portal this morning. No late-night flights necessary. We're back. Sonoko grinned when they saw the familiar living room. We had so much fun. Shame Miko twisted her ankle and only got to play one day. Miko, now able to walk on her own, smiled and said she'd had a great time anyway. As she spoke, she glanced at Xiao Ran. If she hadn't sprained her ankle, maybe there would have stayed an unspoken closeness between her and Xiao Ran, something untarnished. Miko found herself oddly grateful that the ankle had given them a moment alone together. Sonoko watched Miko and smiled. As Xiao Ran's girlfriend, she vaguely understood the dynamic between him and Miko. Who could blame her for falling for a man like Xiao Ran? She'd learned to accept that he had another sister's presence in his life. She couldn't just walk away. That would hand him over to someone else. She couldn't bear that. At noon, Xiao Ran used his lunch break to stop by his office. This was only his second time visiting his own company. The first had been when it opened. Because he had called ahead, Yoko was already waiting at the entrance with her assistant when Xiao Ran arrived. His entertainment company occupied the entire 33rd floor of a 55-story office tower. He'd even talked about building a new headquarters someday to expand his little empire. Of course, all of that depended on Yoko Okino. She ran the place. Xiao Ran was a hands-off owner. His job was to provide the money. "Welcome, boss." Yoko greeted him at the door. Xiao Ran waved and asked, "Have the people from Bikomachi come to sign?" Yoko nodded. "Yes, they're in the reception room." "Let's go," he said. The matter of Bikomachi had been settled yesterday. They were ordinary people, one simple mind control, and they had knelt before him like dogs. Naturally, their contract was terminated without a fight. In the reception room, Xiao Ran saw Ai Hoshino and the rest of Bikomachi as he walked in. "Brother Xiao Ran?" Ai Hoshino darted forward with a beaming smile and hugged him. "Brother Xiao Ran, you're amazing. The company really agreed to terminate our contract peacefully." Ai now worshipped him. He was an all-powerful figure in her eyes. The total liquidated damages for all Bikomachi members had been at least several billion yen, yet they didn't have to pay a single yen. The contract had simply been terminated. It was astonishing. Was this really something a capitalist would do? "Hello, boss," the other members said more reservedly, standing and offering respectful greetings to the man they now considered their benefactor. "All right, everyone, please sit and we'll finalize things," Xiao Ran said, nodding. He didn't need to sit through the whole signing. The contract had been drafted, they merely needed to sign it. The profit split had already been agreed on, a 40-60 split for the group, and Ai Hoshino herself would receive an unprecedented 50-50 share. After the signatures were done, Bikomachi would officially be under Xiao Ran's company. He had Yoko contact people at their former agency. The old board had been brought under his influence, so practically the old company was already his to command. Their activities could continue as before, but from now on, they'd be handled through his company. "I've put another 3 billion yen into the company account," Xiao Ran told Yoko. "Spend it. Money doesn't grow sitting in an account. It makes more money only when it moves." "Understood, boss," Yoko replied and jotted a note for her assistant. After the formalities, Xiao Ran walked Ai Hoshino out. They had lunch at a nearby restaurant and discussed her future plans. As they left the private room, Ai stood on tiptoe, kissed Xiao Ran on the cheek, beamed, and waved as she left with her new assistant. "Thank you for taking such good care of me, brother Xiao Ran," she said at the door. Xiao Ran called the waiter, paid the bill, and went to his afternoon classes. Across town, at an ordinary public high school, Shishigami Hiro had no interest in classes. He strolled across the sports field with his hands in his pockets, heading for the school gate. "Hey, student, isn't it class time?" the security guard called. Hiro glanced at him coldly. "Annoying," he said and walked on, ignoring the startled guard. Once Hiro was out of sight, the guard patted his chest and tried to collect himself. "What terrifying eyes," he muttered, shaken. "How can a student look like that? Scarier than the gang members." He felt embarrassed at having been cowed by a kid and decided not to tell anyone. It would make him a laughingstock and look like dereliction of duty, so he went back to his tea and newspaper. Hiro drifted aimlessly and slipped into a narrow alley. A group of local punks were gathered there, smoking. When they saw a boy in uniform pass, their gazes zeroed in. Hiro ignored them and walked on. Someone insisted on making trouble. "Hey, kid, are you ignoring us?" a punk called, stepping in front of him. A short-haired boy with yellow hair, tattoos on his cheeks, and a cigarette hanging from his mouth spoke with arrogant menace. "I'm in a bad mood. You'd better walk away." Hiro didn't flinch. They were just punks. He was, in his own way, a rebuilt machine now. No ordinary threats bothered him. The punks laughed. Then the yellow-haired leader spat on the ground. "Brat, you're so cocky." Hiro turned slowly. The leader flinched when their eyes met, instinctively taking a step back. His face hardened. "Idiota, you want to die?" He swung a punch. Hiro raised an arm and stopped it as if it were nothing. His arm didn't even move. The leader, stunned, kept forcing the swing, but it had no effect. "Done yet?" Hiro asked flatly. Then, in the next instant, a fist struck the leader's chest with a single crack. Ribs shattered. The boy flew 5 or 6 meters and hit the ground with a heavy thud. He twitched a few times and then lay still. The other punks stared, horror on their faces. They'd bullied kids and grabbed a quick meal and run, but killing? None of them had that nerve. Faced with their leader broken like that, they suddenly understood they were outmatched. "Run!" one of them cried. They scattered. Hiro watched them go with cold indifference, not giving chase. He slowly raised a hand, shaped it into an imaginary gun, aimed, and said, "Bang!"